Hi, everyone. I'm Kelsey McDonald, Vice President of ATTACC, and this is our Combating Consumerism series. And today I'm here with Greg Justice from Transporty, California. Greg, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Greg Justice. I'm the founder and editor of TransportiCA. We're a sustainable transportation news and events program and news source, which is a program part of the California Green Academy.
So first, I'm just going to ask some questions to kind of introduce the company. First, maybe can you explain a little bit more about what TransportiCA is, maybe how it was started, what you do, and anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, so TransportiCA began in May 2015. I started attending the Presidio Graduate School in San Francisco, and I started a student group called Transport Presidio. And it was more to focus on the promotion of sustainable transportation, but most importantly, it was also to actually define what sustainable transportation is. That's a key term right now, especially in California, but there's no official document, no law or regulation that actually defines what the term sustainable transportation is. So through the activities of our organization and also just me personally writing about it, I just realized, okay, why don't we just start a blog from this? So we started TransportiCA. Again, that was in fall of 2015. By 2016, we were attending major events and so forth. The deputy editor and co-chair of it is Remy Pateo, who still serves as deputy editor of TransportiCA even today. And so we started attending major events, including the American Public Transit Association annual conference, statewide conferences, and so forth. We started getting requests because we also tweeted out live these events very prolifically as opposed to other people. And since we both had transportation backgrounds, we actually had context and actual terminology involved with the reporting. So it made a lot more sense than just someone saying, hey, I'm at a great event, buy a Tesla or whatever. So then in January of 2017, myself and others decided that we really need to found a nonprofit organization to actually kind of legitimize this even more and put us more in a legal realm where we're actually a contender. People will take us seriously or more seriously. And so we actually started it, and we had three major programs as well. That was the California Green Academy. And even today, TransportiCA is actually the largest program and the program that attracts the most attention.
That is really amazing because I don't know of any organizations like yours around here. And I think it's so important that we get this information out there about sustainable transportation.
Yeah, we get told that all the time. We're unique. No one's talking like us. No one's bringing up the perspectives that we bring. The most important thing we're doing is first, why don't we define sustainable transportation? So this way, everybody knows what exactly is this form of transportation. And then from that, they can educate as well. Plus, they can defend and hold people accountable to actually doing that. Because otherwise, if we don't actually legally define it, it's just up for grabs and manipulation by, for-profit actors.
Yeah, definitely. You kind of already touched on this, but what do you think are like the main goals or values of your company?
So the overall the California Green Academy, our mission is promoting systems thinking and the triple bottom line in business, energy, and transport. But for TransportiCA specifically, the mission is mobility meeting the triple bottom line. So are you familiar with the triple bottom line?
Yeah, but maybe you could explain it just for
Oh,
viewers.
yeah. So there's always in business what's called the bottom line, and that is essentially the financial aspect of business operations and so forth, how you're doing according to what your income is, expenses, and so forth, whether you're operating in the black, you have money, or you're operating in the red with deficits and so forth. And so in 1997, John Elkington, a well-known business consultant and sustainability enthusiast, connoisseur, intellectual, came up with the idea of the triple bottom line. So instead of just considering the financial aspect, we also need to consider the social aspect in regards to equity, how we're treating others, employees, our workers, the people in our supply chain, and so forth. And then also the environmental aspect. Now, surprisingly, a lot of nations, developed nations around the world, were already considering that, but it really wasn't as enveloped in the UK and the US. So that was kind of a revolutionary thing. The triple bottom line did kind of appear in other ways, especially in 1972's Club of Rome report, and it also came out in the Brundtland Commission's report in 1987, but none of them was put into a specific and detailed concept and definition like it was with John Elkington's triple bottom line. So that's what we do, is we look at it between those three factors. And we're very excited because we were doing this years before. Last year, the unfortunate events dealing with the murder of George Floyd, Black Lives Matter, having more accountability throughout governmental institutions, that's when they really started to take into account. We also need to look at considering the social equity of our actions and the institutional limitations and prejudices within our own institutions. So we're very proud that we were thinking about that, since 2015, and not being a major either public entity or corporate entity as well.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's a really good explanation of that. I was just going to ask, how are you educating others in your community and beyond, and like what methods do you use to do that?
So we have about 16 different programs. Unfortunately, with the pandemic, we have been hit, especially with regards to funding and fundraising. We put a lot of programs on hold. We still do respond to any actions that's happening within the government. Like we recently responded, the state of California put out a climate adaptation and transportation infrastructure plan that was meant to focus $5 billion in investment on sustainable transportation. And overall, the plan itself is wonderful. It's a great plan, but it also doesn't define what sustainable transportation is. And the background of it was, of course, two executive orders that Governor Newsom put out last year and also in fall of 2019, calling for a specific, incredible investment in sustainable transportation. That's the way to go if we're going to meet our climate goals, reduce emissions, all the stuff related to that. But again, none of these executive orders, and at present, no state law or regulation actually defines what is sustainable transportation. So our big thing recently has been responding to acts like that, submitting public comment letters. We also have a major campaign called Codifying Sustainable Transport. So if you went to our address for that, it's ca sustainabletransport.info. You can also find that on our calgreenacademy.org website. We are pushing to get a legal codification of the term sustainable transportation in law, and specifically within the Streets and Highways Code, where definitions about transportation are more appropriate.
I think that's really great, because a lot of people would think the definition for a word like that isn't that important, but it really is, because a lot of people don't understand the true meaning of it.
Yeah. I forgot to add one other program that we started in July 2016, and it's just been incredibly amazing, is we started a book club. We just thought, there's some great publications out there that actually encompass sustainable transport. It also social equity. Most publications on sustainable transport are going to be grounded in environmental aspect and considerations. So that was kind of a no-brainer. But we started it, and that's our most popular program. It happens every month. We have some great publications, and we're, very honored to actually have some very wide-ranging and either localized to international publications. October's publication right now is actually a policy analysis that was released in July from the International Transport Forum, and that's looking at what's called mobility as a service. So a lot of people claim to know what that is. They really don't. We'd recommend that people actually look into the publication to find an international perspective of what mobility as a service is. And you can actually find that on the book club's website, TransportiCABookClub.info.
Wow. Yeah, that's a really unique idea for educating the community. So next, you've touched on this a little bit. I was just going to ask what steps you've taken to become a more sustainable business, as well as encouraging sustainability in your area.
Yeah, so we do the traditional thing that all businesses do and claim to be sustainable when they're really not. We actually, the recycling, we buy reused and recycled products. everything from that perspective. But the problem is that's really less than 3% of California's emissions. The major thing with California emissions, about 40% and also 29% nationally, is transportation. So we're very lucky. We actually have a 100% staff. All of our staff take public transit. One drives occasionally, but it's for family events and so forth. But we are very proud that we have almost an entire staff who does public transit. And we also were working remotely even before the shelter in place orders began around March 2020. So we've had about 1.6 staff working throughout the state, here in Sacramento, in the San Francisco Bay Area, and in Los Angeles as well. That's never been an issue for us. We always knew that we would develop as an organization where we have people throughout the state. We don't have everyone reporting to a central office because we knew that was the greatest way to encourage reduced emissions and also public transit use.
Yeah, I think that's so important because most people just think, oh, if I recycle and compost, I'm going to be completely sustainable, but they don't think of the other aspects. So can you just describe some more about the individual programs you lead? Like I saw there's a Rosa Parks service days and there's Bicyclists Are Human. So if there's any of those you want to talk about, that'd be great.
Yeah, so they're not as active as much. We have two feature programs that we used to be very active with. One is called Bicyclists Are Humans. And unfortunately, in the US, there's an idea that they're not. And this idea that actually cars deserve more rights and more legal treatment than individuals. There seems to be some type of disposable thinking within Americans with bicyclists. So when a bicyclist dies, it's like, oh, well, they're probably not following the law or they rode their bike in front of the car, something like that, that you would never make those comments to anyone else who was driving. You talk about how unfortunate it was, they lost their lives and so forth. And every life being lost is unfortunate. But at the same time, it just seems like there's an incredible devaluation with bicyclists. So we like to remind people that no, actually, what they're doing does benefit you, even if you don't bicycle. First of all, they're not driving, so they're providing more space for you on the roads. And because they're not driving, they're providing more parking spots from you. They're also reducing emissions and providing cleaner air for you. So at a very minimum, we should be thanking the bicyclists because there's so many benefits we receive when people choose to transport themselves on the bike as opposed to drive. Our other feature was Born a Pedestrian. We need to remind everyone that no matter how you travel, whether it's flying or driving and so forth, you were born to walk. So obviously there's some situations where that's not occurring. There are individuals who are born without the ability to walk and so forth. But overall, most people do have that ability. And even between driving and between flying, you're walking. So especially with that feature, we were trying to remind cities and urban planners and so forth, make sure that a pedestrian element is the focal point of any development that you have. You'd be shocked at, even in California, how much urban planning and development goes forward, and then it's unfortunately too late, or it's not until someone really does raise the alarm that, where are people going to walk? This is very closed off and so forth. I mean, even here in Sacramento County, there's a lot of places that actually don't have sidewalks. So it's 2021, it's the 21st century, but we don't have sidewalks in a lot of Sacramento County. So that's one of our features. As I mentioned, the book club and so forth, our public comment program, our codifying sustainable transport. There is one other thing that we do as well, and that's our conference, Transport and the Triple Bottom Line Summit. So we had it this year. Our inaugural one was actually 4 years ago in San Jose. That was a massive summit. We're able to do one again this year. And that again is looking at what are the major issues within transportation. And actually this year we were looking at, again, with the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's report, basically saying it's code red for humanity. That was essentially, okay, we've got to really go into sustainable transportation, public transit, and non-automotive transportation as soon as possible, because otherwise it's going to be too late.
Yeah, those are all really amazing programs. I especially appreciate the biking one because I'm a pretty big biker myself, and I've had a lot of challenges in my area trying to find proper bike routes and safe places to do it. So, yeah.
Well, we also do want to remind everyone under California law, every lane is a bike lane. So what happens is when there is a bike lane provided, it's preferred that you stay in that lane. It's not just so you remove yourself from transport modes. It actually is done to provide more safety to the bicyclist. But if that doesn't happen, you do have the right to actually be in a lane to accomplish your travel.
Wow, that's a good piece of information. So next, I was going to get into the more personal questions I was going to ask you because this is about combating consumerism. Can you just describe your definition of consumerism and why you think it's harmful?
So I thought about this a lot. First, I wanted to ask if you've ever read the book Affluenza.
No, I have not.
Okay. In the late 90s, PBS did this documentary called Affluenza, and it talked about just how bad consumerism, especially in the US, was. And then I think it was in 2002, it was released as a book. That is a very fundamental publication that you should look into. I'm sure you've probably heard the Story of Stuff, which is both a book and also a program itself. But Affluenza really was fundamental in getting people to realize, okay, there's this consumerism thing really is a bad thing. So my personal definition, I usually say it's needless spending that attempts to accomplish some psychological goal. So I'm not referring to when you're buying groceries, when you're paying for medical care and so forth. That's not needless. There is a need for that. I'm talking about when others start to have clothing that you're jealous of, or you think some type of personal validation will occur if you buy the newest electronic item. That's what I consider needless spending. The not stopping and thinking, do I really need this? What are the long-term benefits? What are the long-term effects of me actually purchasing this item and so forth? And most importantly, will it actually psychologically help me out? Will it improve some type of aspect within me to actually buy this? And majority of the times, unfortunately, no, it doesn't do that at all.
I think that's a great definition for that. So next, I was going to ask how you think we can change our consumer society to be more sustainable. I feel like most of the time people often think individual changes. Do you think we need to make more individual changes, or do you think it needs to be more of a structural level to our society?
So it does need to be a structural level. I think the structural level will get to some point, some critical mass where it translates into individualists. And I think right now, there is a lot of individual action that's actually coming collectively together. I think two of the biggest things are our population demographics right now. So we're experiencing this silver wave, this incredible amount of retirees, people reaching an older age and so forth. No greater have we had this in the US, this amount of individuals retiring and reaching a larger age. And a lot of them are realizing that the country and the environment they leave behind to not their kids, but their grandkids is one that's really bad. So you are seeing a lot of older senior citizens who may have not really cared about this before, may still hold very conservative views, not very progressive, not very what they would call an environmentalist, even if they lived through the early stages of environmentalism or what they would have called it conservationism in the late 60s, early 70s. But now, especially, they're realizing, okay, this is actually a bad environment that's going to happen to my grandkids, great grandkids, and so forth. At the same time, we also have what's called tidal wave 2, and that is this massive amount of young people, especially millennials and younger. So we've never had, or we've had it one other time before. We have a lot of children and young people in the US population. Now we have a huge amount. And fortunately, millennials and younger have already been born into this understanding of sustainability, environmentalism, eco action, and so forth is already second nature to these individuals. So, again, if born after 1980, they've already grown up with the understanding that, okay, this is why recycling is good. It's not just because I can get money back for doing that. It's also so I can have actually a cleaner earth with better air quality and so forth. So I think those are actually helping out. I also think, as well as we become a more diversified nation, and especially with California, and as we have a lot of foreign born individuals coming to our states, they're coming from other nations that may have been uber environmental, especially if they're coming from some parts of Asia, a lot of Europe, and so forth. And so they're bringing that understanding of, I can't believe you're throwing away this plastic bottle. There's no reason to do that. So collectively, I think those three things in particular, the large amount of senior citizens that we have that are becoming awakened to the type of environment they're leaving to their posterity, the millennials and younger, the huge amount that's been born and raised to understand what environmentalism, how it is important, and so forth, and how it doesn't just affect themselves, but others. And also the fact that we do have a lot of foreign born individuals that are bringing their perspective of, okay, we've seen what's bad with US consumerism because it also haunts other countries as well. You may have not heard about it, but we actually have heard, and we probably lived through some of the detriment of US consumerism. So I think those things overall are helping out. Obviously, unfortunately, we still have a country that's led by older white men who are conservative and will bow to profits over people any day. The good thing is that's changing, and they're also dying out. I know some people think that's rude, but that's the truth. So we are going to see within the next generation a complete change of that. And we are going to see more female and more minority leaders who understands that the environment is far more important, and consumerism has not really helped out this country.
Yeah, I really like your point about foreign people coming to this country, because people often think, oh, for the US, we're superior, we're better than all the other countries, but the ideas are coming from other countries.
Yeah.
So you touched on this a little bit, but I was just wondering if you have any perspectives on changes that need to be made to the government policies or anything like that.
I think I'm all for government action. There's the carrot versus the stick approach with government, whereas you offer the carrot, an incentive for changing policy before you have some type of restrictive law or some type of enforcement mechanism, as opposed to that being the stick, where you go after, with enforcement, with regulatory frameworks and so forth. I think right now the great change will be our individualism, our individual actions and so forth, accepting that mentality within us. That change has to begin with me. It's no longer, oh, don't worry, there's other people to do it. And I'm sure, Greta Thunberg, she's got a lot of fans in the US. They're going to do their job. So I don't have to worry about that. Plus, I live in California. The government already cares about the environment. No, it's going to take our individual acceptance and individual action that's actually going to make a difference. One particular element of that has been in cars. And so that's what we talk about. Something within sustainable transportation to fight consumerism is the question, do you really need a car? So 95% of the time, your car is actually sitting and idling. It's either in your garage, on your street, whatever. It's not doing anything. On average, in California, we're only using your car 5% of the time. So again, especially if you're in a major urban environment, do you really need that? And as larger cities tend to have car share programs, especially in the Bay Area, it's not really worth it. And especially you're paying, right now, gasoline is at record high for peacetime prices, and especially insurance is high as well. So I think one of the great things is millennials have started to realize I don't really need a car, and it's no longer the status symbol. So like my dad's generation, the car was everything, not just the car, the muscle car. And we needed bigger engines and so forth, more polluting, whatever, because that was the sign of freedom in America. My generation knows. So I don't even have a driver's license. I'm now 38, never had a driver's license. I was born and raised in Los Angeles, and I've never cared about wanting to drive. I will go to my grave without a driver's license because to me, there is zero purpose for having it. There are occasional times where obviously sometimes a vehicle having access to that will happen, especially, for family purposes. There are some times when you're purchasing things where having access to the vehicle helps and so forth. But I think overall millennials have realized that a car is no longer a status symbol. It's environmental degradation, and it's also a very big financial responsibility. So I think that has been one of the great signs for millennials. Millennials get blamed for everything. But that's been one of the wonderful individual actions that have come from this demographic, is understanding that we don't really need a car. And again, the majority of emissions, and especially black carbon emissions in California and the US, come from a vehicle. And why do I need that? One thing that we're looking at right now is we actually just started last month what's called the California Fare Free Transit Information Service. So if you go to the website cafarefreetransit.info, we show every single transit system in the state that is free. We also have 3 other parts of that website that provide all the free transit for if you're disabled or what's called considered an ADA passenger, if you're a senior citizen, 60 years young and older, and if you're a student, grades K through 12, and then also college and university, no matter the age. So we are providing statewide all the opportunities for free transit. So again, not needing that car.
Wow, that's a really cool initiative. So where are you getting like the funding for all that, or is it just through the government?
So, first of all, we get very little funding. I don't want to turn this into a fundraising call, but I mean, if you do want to, feel free to donate. Again, we are a 501c3 organization. We do have federal tax exemption and state tax exemption. So any donations to us are 100% tax deductible and so forth. We do receive a small donation here and there. We actually, for the amount of work we do, that's one of our biggest compliments, is we actually have a revenue system of under $50,000 to accomplish this. So we're doing tons and tons of programs. We also, all the services that we provide, with the exception of 2 services that are classified under what we call professional services. So legally, we are required to charge and for insurance purposes, but everything else, making our information available, our websites, it's free. And our board has said we will not charge people for what we do. We're going right now through a developing an app for free transit. So where you are, you can do a geolocation and find out what are the free transit providers around you and so forth. We're not going to charge for that. So, we do a lot of stuff with very little funding. We were fortunate, for this year, we received a grant from the state of California to help out with nonprofits and so forth. You're more than welcome to donate, but we do a lot of this stuff with very little funding.
Wow, yeah, that's really admirable that you're giving all these free resources. The next question you kind of already answered about how transportation is connected with consumerism. Is there anything else you'd like to add there?
Just the basic thing is, if you're thinking about, especially when you get your license, well, if you even get your license, but just stop and ask yourself, do I really need a car? Are there other ways that can do this? Now, I understand that some people live in areas where transit is just horrible, and there's actually 4 counties in California that don't have public transit services itself. They're more rural, of course. So I understand that to some people, there may be a downside to transit, but for the vast majority of California's population, 90% live in urbanized areas. You have good transit. So again, just asking yourself, do I need a car for this?
Yeah, definitely. I think your statistic from earlier about how the cars are only used 5% of the time is really surprising and interesting. So next, could you just explain a bit why all these changes are needed around consumerism and how they will benefit everyone in a society as a whole?
Yeah, so I'll speak from the transportation side, what we're doing. There's the obvious perspective of consumerism, because consumerism especially makes waste, and that waste degrades our natural environment and affects our water tables. It infiltrates and sometimes poisons our aquifers and all that. But from the transportation perspective, it also makes our air quality horrible. It also results in millions of visits to hospitals for individuals suffering from respiratory illnesses from bad air quality, resulting from the emissions from transportation and so forth. So they're really, again, the less we can drive, the better it is for everything overall. And like I mentioned, with thinking about bicyclists, again, when you see a bicyclist, better air quality with what they're doing, less cars with what they're doing, less parking spots. That's always a major issue for people who love to drive. That bicyclist and pedestrian is doing a lot of good for you without you even knowing it. So the less we can, rely on that privatized transportation and so forth, a polluting individual vehicle, just the better.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's something that a lot of people really need to be educated on because they don't really fully realize the effects of what they're doing. What are some personal changes that are in our daily lives that viewers can do to combat consumerism?
So I don't want to sound like I'm, hitting on the same thing. But again, the reason why we focus on this is because the majority of emissions come from transportation and in your daily life. Well, first of all, if you're working from home, that's great. Enjoy it. That means less and less trips that you're making, less gas that you're purchasing, and so forth. But little things add up. So if you have to go and get some groceries, can you walk to the grocery store? If the weather's great out there, again, you're not going to be paying for gas. You're not going to have to worry about parking. You're going to get some great exercise in there. There's nothing really bad with walking to do that. And any services that you're looking, is there a point where instead of driving, I can walk, I can bike, or I can take transit?
Yeah, definitely. So, are there any changes within transportation and elsewhere that you've made to your life to become more sustainable?
Um, Not really. I mean, again, we still have our office. We have a lot of things there. We're also doing something to help out with others. So a lot of organizations, especially in the nonprofit sector, are not doing too well right now. So the ability to afford physical office space is no longer possible, or it's becoming an incredible expenditure drain on nonprofits. So we're actually opening up our office to other nonprofits who want to pay a small monthly fee. So they actually have a physical address so they can pay the fee, we'll collect their mail, send it to them, and so forth. But in doing that, that also is reducing the amount of trips that's needed. You'll find, in particular in the nonprofit sector, it's great to have a physical address. So, by doing that, by opening our office to other nonprofits, we are decreasing the amount of potential vehicle trips and decreasing the emissions associated with them and so forth. So, that's one thing that the nonprofit and personally I'm doing as well. I put a lot of effort into the nonprofit. I think the best thing you can do is, again, personalize these values. A lot of people also don't see their contribution as major, but it is. It is something that you can do. First of all, you understand there's an issue and you've actually begin to act on it. And that is a huge call to action that needs to be applauded. And so just understanding it, recognizing it, and starting to accept that something has to be different. There has to be a change in my behavior and so forth to consider the environment more.
Definitely. I think your point about like starting to work from home is really interesting, especially because a lot of companies right now are actually considering that with COVID and everything. So I think, yeah, that'll probably be something that becomes a lot more common.
Yeah, I hope a lot of organizations, especially, unfortunately, we're seeing some big names actually revoke. They said that for another year or two going into 2022, they'd still allow individuals to work from home. Now they're saying, well, not really. There's an overall benefit with that happening, especially in the private sector, because the private sector tends to purchase the most expensive type of office space. And when you're doing that, it's going to be in more urbanized area. You are going to have more of a responsibility of your staff to also go and purchase the high cost of housing associated with that, plan their trips to getting to work and so forth. So the environmental benefit and the huge benefits we receive from teleworking is something that really does need to continue. So if you can still work from home, that's wonderful. If you can ask your employer to please work from home, it makes sense. We also are finding out that employees are happier working at home. We're also finding out that employees are spending more time with their workplace responsibilities. So no longer is that 9 to 5 mentality involved. Now, to some extent, you obviously want to promote a work-life balance, but at the same time, there's so many benefits with working from home. If you can't work from home, again, look into transit to accomplish your trip to your job and so forth. One other action as well, if you don't have that great transit, write to someone, write to your state assembly person, your state senator, figuring out, why do we not have such good transit? What can the state do to actually increase funding or increase transit in my area?
Definitely. So, is there any kind of final message or word of advice you'd have to viewers watching this around any of the topics we've discussed so far?
Yeah. So again, It's the small actions that help. Please understand that you should be applauded for implementing individual actions. You don't need to spend tons of money, join some type of organization that's doing this and so forth. It's great to support them, but there are a lot of individual actions that you can do to reduce consumerism, improve our environment, reduce emissions and so forth, really put a dent in the climate crisis. But in particular, I actually want to recommend two books because I think these probably are monumental publications. And I know for me personally, they just really woke me up to things. And first and foremost, like I mentioned, the book Affluenza. You'll read that and you'll understand why consumerism is a really bad thing, especially US consumerism. And the second as well is called Human Transit. And it's actually by Dr. Jared Walker. He's a transportation planner. He's kind of a god in the transportation planning community, but it just makes sense of why non-automobile transportation is so beneficial and why we need to design our environments to focus on more transportation, more access for pedestrians, more access for bicyclists, more transit, and so forth. And I think those two books in particular will help out. There's tons of other books I could recommend, tons of other readings and so forth. But I know personally in my life as well, I really felt a change from reading those two books in particular.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, thank you for those recommendations. I'll definitely put those links with this video for anyone watching. So that's all I have for today. Thank you so much for coming, Greg. I know I personally learned a lot from this. And thank you to anyone watching. And if you'd like to learn more about combating consumerism or just climate change in general, just make sure to subscribe to our channel and look out for more of our videos.